The Justice Beat is dedicated to the 1 in 3 Americans touched by incarceration. Justice Beat is where we discuss all things justice.
Thank you so much for joining us again on this Saturday morning. And please remember to like and share with your family members and friends. In studio today, we have Ms. Angelika Mueller and Ms. Hedy Harden. They are both with C.U.R.E. of St. Louis. Welcome, ladies.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, so let's get started here. We're going to be talking today about medical care and treatment in the jails and prisons and what family members and friends can do to advocate on behalf of their loved ones. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about C.U.R.E. What is C.U.R.E.?
C.U.R.E. Stands for Citizens United for Rehabilitation of Errants. It started in Texas in 1972 with Charlie and Pauline Sullivan. They actually were protesting the Vietnam War and ended up getting locked up and saw the conditions in prison, and they started C.U.R.E. And in 75, they had their first statewide conference. In 85, they went to Washington, D.C. and started National C.U.R.E.
Okay.
And Charlie started going around to different states and trying to help get chapters started. Then in 90, he came to St. Louis, and I was one of 7 people that met with him.
Okay.
And he asked
about 30 years ago.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
He asked if someone would be willing to take over as head of Missouri C.U.R.E, at least to the extent of calling another meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And no one else volunteered, so I did.
Okay.
And so that's when Missouri C.U.R.E was born.
Okay.
So at the time, I was writing to a prisoner who I'd met on a tour, and I had a background in prison reform,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw C.U.R.E as a vehicle to try to get things done.
Okay.
So I've been the head of Missouri C.U.R.E for most of that 30 years.
For most of the 30 years.
Yes.
So how have you been able to impact the area here in St. Louis? I mean, St. Louis has tremendous needs all across the board, but I would say the most tremendous need has a lot to do with the justice system. So tell me a little bit about what your experience has been like since you've been on board for 30 years here.
So C.U.R.E is mainly concerned with people who are in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And their family members.
Right.
So we have meetings, we have a conference every year,
mm-hmm.
and the vice chair of Missouri C.U.R.E is a man named Keith Brown Eel,
mm-hmm.
who lives in Kansas City.
Right.
And he was in prison for 36 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I respect him so much because he was an activist in prison, and he's been an activist since he got out in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a conference in St. Louis, and the next year we have it in Kansas City. And
so you rotate?
Yes,
okay.
Go back and forth.
So this year the conference will be where?
In Kansas City.
Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the middle of the show. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we when you do prison work, it's hard to point to actual successes
mm-hmm.
because you're fighting the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women are supporting men in prison,
mm-hmm.
but we also, of course, there's women in prison too. But the people who support others in prison are often afraid to get involved because their loved one can face recrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a real hard problem. But we have loved ones that come to our meetings every month, and we try to empower them,
mm-hmm.
and we try to inform and educate prisoners with our newsletter. We have, I have to say, an excellent newsletter.
You do. I've read it. I've seen it, and it's very, very insightful.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and prisoners love it. But of course, we're fighting the DOC. If
mm-hmm.
they don't like it, in fact, they are trying to censor our newsletter
mm-hmm.
and keep it out of the prisons. So we're always going back and forth trying to put something really relevant in there at the same time not get it censored.
Right. So are they trying to keep it out of all of the prisons in Missouri?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
statewide. Okay.
I would say especially the maximum security prisons, because that's what we focus on, the abuses in maximum security, especially like in what they call administrative segregation, which is the
mm-hmm.
whole or long-term solitary confinement.
Mm-hmm.
That's where most of the abuses happen because there's no monitoring.
Okay.
And the whole prison system, that's the biggest problem. There's no monitoring.
Right. No monitoring. Right.
Yeah.
Angelica, so what is your role with C.U.R.E?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I joined Missouri.
And speak a little bit. I need to speak into the mic for me, please.
I joined Missouri C.U.R.E in 2017.
Oh, okay.
No.
So you're a newbie?
2014.
14? Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
about 6 years. Okay.
6 years ago, when my husband died in prison, he had cancer. When they detected the cancer, it was already a golf ball size. So, and then, kind of all the neglect that happened, until, when he passed, was really traumatizing, especially how he had to die also, because, we had been fighting. We once he got staged, you stage a cancer, is when it becomes terminal.
Right.
So, once he got staged, we hoped he would be getting out on medical parole.
Mm-hmm.
And, we did everything we could to get him out on medical parole, but he was denied. So he died in shackles and chains, chained to a hospital bed, without us even knowing where he was. So, that kind of was really traumatizing for me.
So let's back up a minute.
Yes.
So he was
He was
taken from the facility to a medical facility.
right. He was in Algoa first when he got ill. You know, when
Okay.
it was really became apparent, and then. At some point of time, they had to raise his medical score, and that was really a fight because he was balling up in bed, and the caseworker would tell me there's nothing wrong with him because Horizon did not send him to the hospital. Can you imagine that? So so I had fights with the system itself, and also then with Horizon to give him the right medical care. But then he was transferred to Tipton to the infirmary, and this is what they do. Because Algoa did not have infirmary, on his level. So
Okay.
they transferred him to Tipton, and from there, the very last day before he died, they transferred him to the hospital. And that has, those practices really have to do with the for-profit medical care that Horizon provides.
Right.
for the
Now,
system.
Horizon, for our listening audience, is the provider of medical treatment and
Yes,
care for
exactly.
all of the state DLCs.
Yes, and the problem is, that when you have a for-profit company providing those services, especially when the contract says, and I just reread this recently, when the contract says, you have to pay for all the services that you cannot provide yourself. You have to pay for them. Like if you have people going for surgeries, or if you have exams that Horizon itself cannot provide, they have to go to the hospital or to experts outside, and they will have to pay it out of their budget, which means like they're waiting until really the very last minute to do what they actually would have to have done much earlier. Yeah, and that was part of
any medical care or treatment services that are not authorized or provided by Horizon have to be paid for by the individual inmate.
No, they don't have to be paid by
They
the
don't?
inmate, but Horizon has to pay for those services out of their budget.
Out of their budget.
They get
Okay.
a certain amount of money allocated for providing services to the prisoners within the Missouri Department of Corrections, and anything they cannot provide, they have to pay out of pocket, out of their profits,
Right,
basically.
right.
So that's why they cut corners everywhere and try to procrastinate and postpone or even
Okay, got you.
not-
Right.
Mhm,
And
yes.
right. That's why there's a big issue with Horizon.
Exactly.
Is the for-profit model that they have.
Yes, exactly. Mhm,
Okay.
Yes.
What
So,
do you, go ahead.
going back to your question, that's when I got involved with Missouri C.U.R.E. because for me it was also like a vehicle to start doing something because I didn't want to feel so helpless and so powerless, after all that had happened to me and to Robert's family. So I became Missouri C.U.R.E.'s Prisoner Health Committee coordinator.
So you coordinate the health committee, the prison health committee?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, and what I started doing is I used the newsletter to connect with the prisoners, trying to get their feedback in regards to how are you satisfied with their medical care, and it started trickling first, kind of 10, 20, 50, 100, 150, 200, and prisoners writing about their concerns about what we already said, delays of treatment, misdiagnoses, that, for instance, like cancer get misdiagnosed as hernia, or, they're being told, okay, one eye is enough. I just recently had somebody write.
When you say one eye is enough, you're
means-
talking about,
I'm talking about the eyes, yes.
Right,
I'm
right.
talking that they will only fix like one eye.
one
if you
eye,
have
and say you have
cataract.
one good eye, so it's no need for us to have
Exactly,
to.
and there was one recent case where, a man it was in Northeast Correctional Center, he lost his vision suddenly. Nobody, of course, at that point knows why.
Right.
So, but it's a very concerning thing. Like not to be able to see anymore. And I have it in writing that they told him, this is not an emergency. You have to go to sick call sometime down the road, and he ended up losing the eyesight. So this is just one example of how things are not being taken care of. Although the law actually tells stipulates that they have to.
Right.
Yeah,
Tell
because
what you did.
So
with
at
all
the,
these letters.
yeah, and seeing at that point,
Right.
with the loss of eyesight, you're talking about now a person with a disability.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's impacting their
Yes.
daily, their ability to take care of their
Yes.
daily activities.
Yes, exactly.
right.
And that's, exactly why I was doing it, because I was, at that point when I started to work with C.U.R.E, I wanted to be able to prove that Robert's case was not an individual thing going
There was
gone
more
wrong,
systemic in nature.
but that there is really systemic issues behind it. And what I did is, once the prisoners wrote to me, I addressed the Department of Corrections, because they are the ones overseeing Horizon. They have contract monitors who are supposed to be watching that appropriate healthcare is provided on one hand side, but also that the contract between Missouri Department of Corrections and Horizon is being kept. Basically adhered to.
Right.
So I kind of challenged them and said, hey, we have a prisoner here who has this condition, or he's suffering from that, and he's not getting his meds and stuff like that. And, kind of to get their responses.
So let's back up for a minute. So
okay.
part of your strategy was to begin to collect letters from family members and friends, right?
Yes.
And in doing so,
documenting
I've been
them.
actually doing that for 30
Right.
years.
for 30 years, right?
But not strictly medical.
So,
Right.
so part of that is being able to show that it's not just an individual concern, but
Exactly.
when you begin to collect letters from family members on medical issues, you can then begin to show this is systemic and be able to have a stronger case in presenting your concerns.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So, in most cases, I have to say, Department of Corrections was always like, okay, well, we looked into this case and we talked to, we looked at the medical records and we talked to the staff and nothing is wrong.
Right. Okay.
In some cases, I started also, being able to read between the lines, because sometimes it would say, if it was a medication issues that they had delayed or not given medication, and I addressed that. They would say, currently this person is on such and such medication, which told me, now currently after we pushed it, they are back on that medication.
Right,
And
okay.
before, to kind of like indirectly, saying, okay, not wanting to acknowledge that something went wrong, but you can.
Once you started making inquiry, then they started to respond. Okay.
Right. So
okay.
I think, going into what people can do or family members can do, it is always important. First of all, it's really important that the prisoners themselves follow the grievance procedure.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to get to.
Yes.
Is we're going to take a quick break. And on the backside, what we're going to discuss is the grievance processes that we need to let family members know
Right.
about and what they can do to begin to address some of these issues. Okay. So stay with us, listening audience. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Welcome back, Justice Beat listening audience. Thank you so much for rejoining us. Please remember to like and share with your family members and friends. And also, if you have any questions for us, our call-in number is 515-599-1687. Again, the number is 515-599-1687. Okay, Angelika, we want to pick back up where we left off with the grievances. We want to share with family members and friends the need to make sure that when there are concerns being raised in the jails or prisons regarding medical care and treatment, accessing, to make sure that they file a grievance. Let's talk a little bit about the grievances.
Yes. Before we get to the grievance themselves, I think it's important to know what your right is. And that is laid down in the law, in regards to medical. The Missouri revised statutes, number 217.230.
Missouri Statute 217.30. 230.
230, right. They stipulate, it's stipulated by law that the medical care provided to prisoners has to be equivalent to community standard. Which is really important when you file grievances, that you know what you can really relate to. It kind of gives more information about it in this statute, that it means stressing health care, education, disease prevention, immediate identification of health problems, and early intervention to prevent more debilitating chronic health problems. So that's what the law says, and what prisoners have the right to. So, now we can come to the grievance procedure itself. It is really important. I know many prisoners are discouraged, and gave up on filing grievances because they know the outcome is always the same, that it says we have reviewed your case and there's no merit to it, or you did not file in the time frame that was given, and that often goes back to that people are not able to file in the time frame because they may be in segregation and not having access to it, or the functional unit manager or the caseworker will delay passing their grievances on. So a lot of people tend to give up on using the grievance procedure, or they may not be able to write up something, in a concise way, because that's not easy.
Right.
If you want to file a grievance, you have to really be concise in regards to what the problem is and what you want what the remedy is that you need.
Right. So for family members and friends listening who may have a loved one that is in a jail or prison, you want to encourage them to make sure that they are documenting thoroughly all instances of any type of limitations on their access to medical care and treatment. Anytime that they have lodged a complaint, they have informed the CO and what the response was. Angelika?
Yes, that is the...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a necessity to do this if you ever want to file a case in court. Yeah, because no judge will be able to pick this up if you have not followed and exhausted
all of your internal options, right?
Yes, the internal options, exactly.
All right, caller, we have a caller on the line. Welcome. Good morning to the Justice Beat Talk Show. How can I help you?
Just had a question.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
Wanted to know what we can do to bring some attention to this matter. What our politicians can do to try to, expose this problem.
What I would encourage you to do is one of the reasons why this show exists is to try to expose this issue. C.U.R.E is a wonderful organization to become a part of. Hedy, you had mentioned that you all have monthly meetings.
Yes.
When are those meetings held?
They're held on Friday at the U.City Library.
I wanted to know what we can do to bring some attention to this matter. What our politicians can do to try to, expose this problem.
Okay.
You can
Sir,
come to our next meeting.
Hang on, Hedy. Sir, turn your radio down or the sound in the background, and Hedy's going to address your question, sir. Go ahead, Hedy.
Okay, we have our next meeting in St. Louis is on Friday, February 28th at the University City Library at 6:30 in Meeting Room 2. And we would love to have you there. We also meet in Kansas City monthly on the third Monday of each month. And their next meeting is this coming Monday at 6 o'clock at 3811 Chestnut.
Now he's also addressing the policy side of this. How do we get this information out to the politicians? I mean, some of them are really aware of some of these issues, but what can they do from an advocacy standpoint at the community level to raise the awareness about this issue of medical neglect and not being able to access treatment on the inside?
Okay. Are you saying what can the politicians do?
No, what
can we do?
This gentleman wants to know how can they get involved and start informing their politicians. What would you suggest would be great ways for family members and friends? Because this is what this is about, trying to empower them to be able to connect with the folks on the ground, either through organizations or the politicians.
I think a point to start with is to really know who your representative is in the state capitol.
Right.
the House, representative, state representative in the House or in the Senate, and to make a connection with them, to get to know them and to talk with them about your loved one situation. And, the more people that do that, the more they will have to get involved, because they just cannot ignore this anymore. I want to add that we just recently had a rally in Jefferson City, actually together with another group that is located in southwestern Missouri, Justice for Inmates, at the Capitol, trying to raise awareness. And, it's just difficult to get people out because it was on a work day. It's on work days and people, may not be able to participate. But any we need to really use any possibility that is there to raise awareness, to make people aware of, first of all, also what's going on in the prison system, because a lot of people who are not affected, those 2 out of 3, who are not affected, think, okay, the state, kind of has, the prisons are run by the state, so that's definitely better than private prisons, and they don't see that, the services that are surrounded, that are basically supporting the state prison system are all provided through for-profit providers by.
You can also
when you so this goes back to that gentleman's question that just called in. So when you were at the state capitol and you all had your rally, who did you connect with there? Because I think a lot of local folks, regular people, are not familiar with who's over the judiciary committees, who's over the DOC, those that address the jails and prisons. Who were you connected with so that the folks listening to the show can be empowered and informed in that way to know who they can call to start complaining about some of these issues?
This is what I was starting to say, that you can also directly contact people on the corrections committee. And there's another committee now called the Special Committee for Criminal Justice. And they've been active in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So they would be some good ones to know who's on that committee and who is approachable.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
For a time, we have been working with Bruce Franks.
Bruce
Jr.,
Franks, right.
who was on the corrections committee during the time that he was in office. And, we are still figuring out who could be the one to we could continue the work with, because it's really important to have some legislators in there who already have awareness and who are willing to, really address issues. Or in some cases, Bruce even talked to the director of the Department of Corrections himself. It was Lombardi at the time.
He also talked to Ann Preside.
He did? Okay.
Oh, yes.
He was still, exactly.
And precise, yes, she's over
so
DOC,
to address the most egregious and acute situations. But of course, this should not actually be the task of a legislator. The legislator should be doing law. Passing legislation that is helpful.
Have you all considered holding community town hall forums for people who have loved ones incarcerated to come out and air their grievances, maybe with a panel discussion with some of the legislators and folks from DOC, to come out and hear these grievances? Because what I'm hearing this gentleman say, he wants to get involved, but you got to be able to galvanize the family members and friends in a way that their voices are amplified to the correct people.
We have done that in the past at our annual conferences.
Okay.
And we would like to do it more often, but we would need to get together with some other organization.
Okay.
Because of our resources. We're all volunteers. We don't have, funds. We spend most of our money on printing our newsletter, postage, and putting on our conference, because we don't charge any admittance and we provide free lunch.
And so what we can talk about, and we'll talk about this post the show, is ways that we can pull this off in the community where it's not expensive. We're not talking about having to have food and all of that.
Yeah.
We're saying let's give the people in St. Louis a place to come to air their grievances to the powers that be.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit after the show. Yes, Angelika.
At the time, I just want to remind that after the Michelle Alexander's book came out.
Yes.
This really
The new Jim
kind
Crow.
of was so
Galvanized people.
galvanized people, and there was a different organizations were coming together. It was called CAPIC, Coalition to Abolish the Prison Industrial Complex.
Right.
And, that was actually the focus of what we wanted to accomplish, to make people aware and give people a place to, get involved.
And see, a lot of the effort on the ground now around justice reform, criminal justice reform, is more so addressing the policies that created this, as well as getting folks to a place of understanding that the system is broken. But I think at times we're forgetting about, while we're doing that, there are egregious things happening on the inside.
Yes, exactly.
And that is still something that needs to be addressed and attended to. Okay?
Yes, definitely.
So it needs both.
Absolutely. We need to be working both ends
Yes.
of the candlestick, okay, so we can keep the light burning.
Yeah.
Again, if you have any questions or comments, our call-in number is 515-599-1687. Again, the number is 515-599-1687. So let's see, what happens after the grievance process? What is supposed to happen when an individual files a grievance on the inside?
What is supposed to happen?
What are the next steps?
Well, the DOC has a certain amount of time to respond. And if they respond negatively, which they usually do, then the prisoner has to appeal.
Right.
And there's certain time limits and everything. And then there's a little more time that they have to respond to an appeal. And I don't know if there's more than one appeal or not, but before you can file a lawsuit, you have to exhaust
all of it.
Yes.
All of your administrative remedies, you have to exhaust all of those.
The problem is that can drag out over a really long period of time. So
but in that process, though, there's supposed to be a response from the facility. See, the reason why it's important for the individual to file a grievance, not just to lodge their complaint about access and lack of medical care and treatment, but we need to get DOC on record with their response.
Yes, exactly.
So when you file a grievance, it's going to trigger the need for DOC to file their response. And that response is going to be critical to how we move forward in the event they are non-responsive to the care and treatment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How are you guys finding the response of DOCs to some of these grievances?
Very unresponsive. It also happens, that if people insist, okay, my issue was not addressed, right? And they just repeat it, they are told, okay, this is a repeat grievance, and so we discard it right away. So, I agree with you. It's really important to have a DOC on record, and this is exactly why I did it too. Because otherwise you will not be able to, prove it. It's
exactly.
Their word against yours, and whose word is taken more seriously.
Right.
A big issue is the fact that most people in prison do not have a high level of education unless they've educated themselves while they've been in prison.
Right.
And so it's, as Angie mentioned, it's hard for them to be concise and direct in following all the issues and when they file their grievance.
Right.
And so the DOC takes advantage of that to just dismiss them often.
Yes. Or turn their words around. I had it, that Robert was filing grievances and they would just take it out of context and, just dismiss it,
Right. Which is why your group is really important too, because when you look at what they have filed, you can kind of make a little bit more sense out of it and try to articulate it in a way that DOC cannot dismiss it just on GP, on general principle.
But I have to tell you that was very, very time consuming.
I
spent hours and hours and hours just, kind of rewriting letters in a way and connecting it to other prisoners, that who had similar grievances and then writing. So, and that is something that a volunteer organization cannot do in the longer run. You really need, for that you would need staff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take another break. This will be our last break of the show. But when we come back, let's talk a little bit about what family members can do. We've talked about what the individual who is incarcerated should do to get their medical needs addressed. But let's talk a little bit about when that individual talks to their family member and tells them what's going on, and family members are feeling like, oh, I don't know what to do. Let's try to give them some strategies, phone calls that could be made, letters that could be sent, to kind of give them a sense of feeling like they're making some kind of headway on behalf of their family member. Okay, Justice Beat listening audience, would you please stay with us? We appreciate you. We're going to take a quick break for 3 minutes, and we'll be back. When we return, we're going to give you some strategies and tips on how to advocate for your loved one that's incarcerated in a jail or prison. Welcome back to the Justice Beat Talk Show. And I want to, before we move into our discussions about what you can do as a family member or friend, I want to address a question that came through on our Facebook page from Randall C. Cahill. His question, Hedy and Angelika, is, what's the possibility of getting some type of public oversight committee to monitor the response time to prisoners' grievances?
Well, different entities have been struggling for decades to try to get an ombudsman to investigate things in the prison. And there's a lot of pushback from the DOC. They control everything, and they want to keep it that way. And they have what they call a citizens committee that's supposed to monitor these things, but it's about 5 people that are handpicked. And from what I've heard, they don't really do anything. They so-called investigate, but I don't see any results.
They always go along with what DOC says.
Yeah.
So they're handpicked by DOC?
Probably by the governor.
The governor?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long have they been around?
Oh,
The Citizens
as
Committee?
long as C.U.R.E. at least.
Over 30 years?
Yes.
Do we know who sits on that committee?
I know
It's on the
one woman who
webpage.
does.
Okay, so we need to look into that.
Yeah.
We're going to do some research on
But
that
if
and
you-
figure
Okay.
out
But if
who's
you're
on that
asking-
committee,
Okay.
what effectiveness have they had or impact, how long they've been there, and what we need to do to change that so that it becomes effective on behalf of the inmates that are incarcerated. Okay,
Yes.
we should not have a citizens committee that is handpicked and not know what they're doing.
Right.
Okay, the family members and friends are going to have to drive this. Even if there is a
Exactly.
citizens committee, we need to be driving and dictating what they're doing. Okay, so
Yes.
we're going to look into that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now let's talk about family members and friends who have a loved one that's incarcerated in a jail or prison. What can they do from where they sit?
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on the last one. Family members should really speak with their representatives about this too.
Right.
You know, that we do need this oversight. Yeah, because otherwise things will not change. I mean, you can address an individual issues and maybe get it resolved, but there will always be hundreds of more every day. And, you know, unless we address this really in a more systematic way and change the conditions of how oversight is being performed, you know, nothing, you know, will change in the longer run. So, but, you know, when we talk about what family members, how they can support their loved ones.
Yeah, let me give you an example. So let's say a family member receives one of their regular phone calls from their loved one. And the loved one is saying, listen, I'm having some problems with let's say they have an issue with epilepsy, which means they may have seizures from time to time, but they're not being seen by a medical physician. They're not given their medications on a consistent basis. How do we encourage and empower the family members to take some level of responsibility in a very informed, confident, and bold manner to be able to advocate for their loved ones?
Yes. First thing is, I think, to support your loved one, because oftentimes they may be in distress and may not, you know, be able to follow the procedure, like request with a medical request, or, you know, kind of that, you know, they just will not be able to help themselves. So, you know, you help, you support them in regards to, okay, go through, you know, what do I have to do to get the medical attention that I need?
Is that a phone call? to the
you were
medical.
talking about you were talking about when they call you,
Yes.
know, kind of you be
Call a
helpful
family
in
member,
this
yeah.
in this phone
The
call.
family
you
member
know,
is
if they
saying,
don't know.
I feel like my hands are tied. What do I do?
Right.
What are the next steps?
Well, if it's an immediate emergency, people have to call a 911. Not not 911.
Right.
A code 16. So you know, and make sure that
The prisoner calls
the
it
prisoner
code
has to
16.
do this. Yes. If it's something that just needs to be addressed, they have to file a so-called MSR, medical service request.
A
So
medical
they do have
service
to
request
follow.
was MSR.
They do have to follow that procedure, otherwise they will not be seen. You know, and so family members can help with getting this just kind of to remind them of that. But then a possibility is kind of to really talk to call the prison. If it's a medical thing, you would have to talk to Horizon, which is not easy because they may not want to talk to you. But you have to be consistent, and you have to insist on speaking to somebody in charge, to the director of nursing,
The director of nursing.
or
Okay.
the health service
Or health
administrator,
services,
who
right.
is even above her. Like because she is basically, or mostly she, running the whole operation in the particular prison, and insist of being called back and kind of being able to. But the problem is, first of all, and that is very important, you have to your loved one in prison has to give you the authority to speak about
their behalf, right.
on their issues. So he has to sign something that is called HIPAA, the HIPAA release, that you are able to talk about his medical issue, because
Right.
otherwise, if you call, they will tell you, I cannot talk with you because I don't have authority. And
Right.
this is correct, because medical staff can never talk to anybody else about not
another
even,
person's medical
not even
records,
a
right.
family member about a person's medical stuff.
So how do they get the HIPAA form sent to their loved one?
The loved one in prison has to get the form from medical,
From medical
and
services.
then sign it and send it to. Well, I mean, it's always good to have your copy, so he should send it to the loved one outside.
Right.
But that shouldn't be necessary. But if you want to prove something in the end, it's always good to have a copy outside.
Exactly.
Right, and that
So
is
the person in prison signs it and then turns it
And
back
turns
into
it back
medical.
in.
back into medical. Yes.
And make sure the family member keeps a copy of what they returned.
Yes. Exactly.
That is your record. Again, it's very important to document these instances. Okay.
In particular, if it's something serious.
Right. Okay. So they have the HIPAA form signed. The HIPAA form a copy is kept by the family member or friend and returned back to the person that's incarcerated. What's next?
Well, you will hope that they will address the issue.
So at that point, the family member or friend should be able to then call health services and have a discussion about their loved one's condition, medical
Yes.
condition, correct?
Yes, if it's something immediate,
Right.
of course you need to call.
Right.
The difficulty or the problem in the longer term, looking at it in the longer term, is that having talked to them does not give you any kind of proof what you did. I'm talking about the person outside.
Right.
Yeah, because unless you document each and every word that you've talked with, the Don, the director of nursing or the health service administrator, you are not able to. You will, after a while, forget what exactly you said or when you said what or what information, what the information they gave you about certain issues. So it's always important to really document that. Write it down. Write down what you talked about, what responses you got, and what they promised to do or not to do, and whatever it was. Otherwise, it may not have any result.
Can you record the telephone conversation?
I think Missouri is a state where you are allowed to record phone conversations without even their
Without their consent?
Without
Need to
their
double check
consent.
on
I
that.
just recently heard that, but this is something that would have to be confirmed.
I
Right.
believe
Yeah.
Keith has
I
done
think-
that before, and he would just
Yes,
tell them.
you can.
That he's
So
recording
that-
the conversation.
That makes it easier, definitely.
So,
but-
so let's back up for a second, because now we have the HIPAA form signed, returned, copy kept by the family member. Conversations have been had. Let's talk about what that conversation should look like, because one of the things we want to be very mindful about is any level of possible retaliation against the person that's incarcerated for any inquiries. So when we're calling to speak with health authorities, folks in medical services, we want to make sure that we're calling in a very professional but yet informed manner. And what should that look like? Hedy?
I wouldn't be the one to answer that. All I know is that the recrimination and retaliation it's rampant.
Mm-hmm.
And we get so many letters from prisoners saying this happened in response to, what I did, or, trying to fight for my rights.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens all the time. So
Right.
we have loads of information about what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as, even when my husband was in prison, I was not the type of person to call and complain.
Mm-hmm.
He knew how to fight for himself pretty well.
Mhm.
And I knew how to fight with the newsletter and other things, but I was not the confronting type.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
What if there is an individual that has no one to fight for them and they don't have that level of fight in them?
well, again, we deal with legislators
Mhm.
and the corrections committee.
Okay.
And we write letters and we do what we can in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well,
Angelika?
we've also had situations, that other prisoners, like the cellmate, would fight for the person, or would help with getting
Not physically
issues.
fight, but
No,
at
yeah.
least
Not
they
physically.
they
fight.
would at least be able to
Yes.
help guide and
Right.
direct and give them some pointers on how to advocate for themselves.
Get the word out,
Mhm.
yeah, and inform us, or inform the medical or the functional unit manager, to get that person help.
Mhm.
But it's difficult if you have no loved one out here, and that's something that is really important to remember. Some family members will just think, I think there are some family members out there who think, okay, they are taken care of and everything is being addressed, and that they themselves are maybe in situations that they're overwhelmed and feel not capable of taking care of their loved one in prison. But when it comes to kind of the neglect in medical and or these egregious situations in solitary confinement, it's really important to stick with your loved ones, even if it's difficult. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we really need to begin to look at what it is we could do to help develop a strong family and friends network, and being able to have a place for strong advocacy to happen.
Yes.
Because on one hand, we may not want to leave it up to family members to contact facilities, but if there was a well-credentialed and well-recognized entity that could do it on their behalf, that would still address the issues where you wouldn't have the instances of people maybe ignoring the complaints that are coming in. So
We have-
that's another thing that we want to talk about.
that-
Yes, go ahead.
We have some of our members with loved ones in prison who are very effective in calling the prison whenever something is wrong, especially medical,
Right.
and are very good at that and have been doing it for years
Their own loved ones, right?
for their own loved ones.
Because I do want to say again, it gets overwhelming if a voluntary organization has to do this, and I mean I got to the point that I was being acknowledged by Missouri Department of Corrections, and was definitely helpful for me to be involved instead of just a family member. But you can, in the longer term, it really needs it needs a entity that is able
It's
to
an
do this
oversight
in a
entity.
consistent
Absolutely, that they will
way.
recognize and honor. That is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And that takes away some of this danger of retaliation also, because
Right.
that will only come if they know, okay, you're an individual, and we can do with your loved one whatever we feel like, But if it's more people, and if those people get to come together, and if you have really somebody in the background backing you up,
Right.
then it's not so easy to do that.
But Hedy, you said some people have been effective. Well,
Yes.
why have they? Do you know why they have been effective?
I think it's partly the force of their personality.
Okay.
But I was going to say that we have, well, at least I have developed some rapport with the Department of Corrections and with the director of adult institutions who gave me her business card and told me to call her whenever there was an issue. And actually, the first time I called her with an issue was about the censorship.
Okay, the censorship of your newsletter.
Yeah. And she investigated it and came back with a letter saying that she agreed with the censorship. And the next thing I heard, she was asked to resign.
Wow.
So I don't know what the connection, if any, is with that.
All right.
But it's a constant struggle if you're trying to have a rapport with them, because we know that we're on opposite sides. You know, and we can try to work together whenever possible, and they do try to give me respect. But, you know, I have to be careful what I say and how personal I get about prisoners, and try to respect their anonymity if possible when it's, you know, an overall issue.
Right. All right, we're coming up on 3 minutes remaining in the show, and I promised that I wanted to be able to highlight some of your efforts. When and where are your monthly meetings? Let's talk a little bit about your planned conference for Kansas City this year, and we can try to wrap this up with some recaps. And Hedy, you want to talk about some of your activities?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have meetings every month in St. Louis and in Kansas City.
Dates and times, please, and locations.
Okay, in Kansas City, it's the third Monday of each month, 6 o'clock at 3811 Chestnut.
Okay.
In St. Louis, it's not always on the same week of the month because I have to arrange for Keith. He comes here.
Okay.
For the meetings.
Okay.
And so we have to arrange around his schedule and around the schedule of the Kansas City meetings because he's here for like 5 days out of the month.
All right.
But it's always on a Friday at 6:30 at the U-City Library.
U-City Library on Fridays at 6:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Occasionally we have it at my place because we have like every 3 months we have a potluck.
Okay.
So, but
do you have a website?
Yes, it's www.MissouriCure.org.
Okay, www.MissouriCure. Is it MO-Cure or Missouri spelled out?
Spelled out.
Okay, www.MissouriCure.org. Okay.
Right. And the email is Hedy Harden, HEDYHARDEN 995@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Angelika?
Going back to the website, we started documenting on our website the most egregious cases of conditions in solitary confinement, about obstruction of justice that we also talked about, and we will start publishing medical cases of medical neglect.
Okay,
yes,
so on your website you have started posting prison narratives of some of the most
prisoner
egregious
narratives.
cases.
Yes.
Okay, and this question just came to me. Where are the most egregious actions taking place? Which top 3 facilities? Can you tell us
Well,
that?
they're maximum security.
Maximum
facilities.
security.
There's Southeast Correctional Center.
Southeast Correctional.
In Charleston. There's
In Charleston.
Central
South
Correctional
Central.
And
Center.
Central Correctional.
In Licking.
And Licking.
Jefferson City Correctional Center.
Jefferson City.
And,
Okay.
There's also
ERDCC
the,
Bonterre.
In Bonterre.
And Bonterre. Okay.
And Potosi.
And Potosi. So
Yes.
those are 5, the top 5.
Potosi.
What would you say would be the top 3 medical complaints?
Medical complaints, just ignoring when they
Ignoring
have an emergency.
the emergencies.
Or,
Okay.
bad physical situation. Actual abuse.
Abuse. Okay.
Even with-
Physical abuse.
Yes.
Okay.
And the lack of them even allowing them to file a grievance in ADSEG.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about.
And there's pure torture in ADSEG.
It is
And ADSEG, yeah.
exacerbated. Medical conditions are really exacerbated in ADSEG.
Okay.
And you can read some of those narratives to see what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the website is www.MissouriCure.org. On there, you can also find prison narratives about some of the egregious actions that are taking place in the facilities across the state of Missouri. Thank you so much, Justice Beat listening audience, for joining us. I want to thank our guests today, Angelika Mueller, as well as Hedy Harden, both of C.U.R.E. And I'm very, very excited about the possibilities. And we're going to definitely talk about things that would help us continue to keep our listening audience engaged and find ways for them to actually get involved. Thank you so much for listening to the Justice Beat Show today. Thank you and God bless.